what default is as a technology term. It's used a lot. It means the same thing, but it's used in a lot of different ways. So we'll take a look at the ways it's used. We'll take a look at some examples of what default is, and we'll talk about why understanding defaults gives you options for being able to personalize your technology. The term default means that your device, or the people that made your device, has some built-in choices that are made for things that are already set up for you so that you don't have to make any changes whatsoever in doing anything. And that's what the term default means. There are built-in choices that are made, and you may not have known you had choices, but they're made for you on behalf of the company or organization that makes your device. So it's a pre-selected option that you don't have to worry about. And so it fits the needs of most people that buy a piece of technology. So for an iPhone or Windows computer or Mac or tablet or even a lot of other technologies, it works right away. You don't have to make any changes to do anything. And you can customize it and change it in settings. Default applies to a lot of things. It applies to folders. So there are default folders that come set up on your device. In Windows, it might be the Documents folder, the Pictures folder, the Downloads folder. Apple has its own set of folders. It has a Photos Library folder that's opened with the Photos app. It has a Downloads folder as well. These come pre-set up on your device. And these give you the ability to automatically organize your files without having to make choices. For example, if you're working in Word in a Windows computer, anytime you go to save a document, it'll be saved in your Documents folder automatically. You can create folders or change the default if you want to, but the default will always be there and always have a way it's done without you needing to make any changes. And so that's the way computers and technology usually start out right out of the box, is that there's ways to take care of things that you don't have to think about. All of your downloads from the web go to the Downloads folder. All of your photos will end up in a Pictures or Photos Library folder. So they end up in places automatically so that you don't have to think about it. But you can change where things are located with folders. So the term default folder applies just to folders. There's default applications as well. Applications have defaults, which means that when you actually open up a web link in an email, the default web browser built into your device, either it's Safari or Edge or Chrome for Chromebooks, Safari for Macs, Edge for Windows computers, is going to automatically open up and make that work. Pictures will automatically open up with Preview or the Photos app when you click on a picture. And then documents, whether using Windows or Mac, will open up in Word or Pages to open up files and documents if you have that. So there's applications that are set up. Applications will open up like a PDF folder. They'll open up a web page. They'll open up photos and pictures. And they're set up in the software right when you start to use your device, and you can change them if you want to. There's default settings. Usually it's a gear or 3 dots that might indicate where to go to settings, and settings are in not only your computer devices and technology devices, they're in your applications as well. Like within your browser, you've got default settings, things that happen automatically so that you don't have to think about them. There's things like the wallpaper, the background image that's preset by the manufacturer. We don't really think about it, but there's a background image on our screen when we don't, have our computer is asleep or it's not active, or a background image on our smartphone or tablet, and that's preset by the manufacturer. The size of the text is set to a medium range, and these little dots I have on here are trying to show that there's something in between that usually is selected. Brightness is set usually to automatically adjusting for lighting and doing things like that. And volume is set to adjusting the volume and the sound level as well. Browsers launch by clicking the URL link. When you click in an email or a messaging app, when somebody includes a link, that browser will launch and that'll be the default browser. Your operating system looks in the settings to determine what the default browser is, because you may have noticed that if you've downloaded Chrome onto a Mac or a Windows computer, it'll ask you, do you want to change your default browser to Chrome? And this happens whether you download any browser to your computer that's not the standard default one, as they want to make it the default browser. And then when you open up your web browser, it launches automatically. So your computer is doing all of these things for you. The same kind of thing happens when you open up a PDF file. You've got a default font. Whenever you start a document, one font is going to appear. When you start an email, somehow or another, your computer knew to choose a particular font and a particular font text size automatically when typing in a document or an email. That's a default that's set up by your device in settings that is assumed it probably will work for most people. And so it's set up automatically. You have a default printer. If you have more than one printer set up in your computer, some people do. Maybe you might have set up a printer at a friend's house or at a library or something like that. You've got one printer that's chosen automatically as your default printer. So you can see this term default just doesn't mean one thing. It has to have a second word. Is it your default printer? Is it a default application? Is it your default browser? Is it a default folder? There's also defaults in networks like routers. And it's important on your router to understand that the default password is often admin or 1234. Now, this isn't the Wi-Fi password. Usually when you get a router with a wireless Wi-Fi connection that it makes from your internet service provider, they set up a password on the router and they usually have a tag. But oftentimes the actual password to log into the router itself, to change any settings on the router, is just admin. The username is admin, the password's admin. And so you may or may not know how to change that, but you can typically talk to the people that have supplied your router, and they can help you determine if there's something, if it's been reset or not. And the problem is that these passwords are widely guessed. There's other types of tools out there, like there's a very common web hosting software called WordPress, where the administrator password is set to admin, and unless people change it, they run a risk of somebody being able to hack into their website. Strong passwords are really good. It's good to change them on your router. If you bought your router on your own, you can check the manufacturer's website. If you got it from an internet service, you can obviously have them do it. User accounts and updates. There are default user accounts lots of times that are created automatically, and default update settings that exist. Automatic updates are usually set up for your operating system as on. Both Mac and Windows and iPhone and Android do that, and they keep your device up to date. They download updates to the operating systems and applications and other, so that they are able to work very quickly and easily. Sometimes when you go to a hotel or a library and you want to use their internet, they might ask you if you want to use it as a guest account. There are options in network settings for people to set up those guest accounts as well, and they can be created automatically so that people don't have to have a special password or don't get access to other settings they might have. Your privacy and security settings on your devices have defaults as well. So there's location tracking, there's preset choices for apps that use your location. Obviously with a map, if you want to use the Maps application, it needs to know your location. But there are other applications that may or may not need to use your location, but it might be helpful to let it know. And there are preset choices. Sometimes they ask for your permission, sometimes they don't. There's data sharing for settings for when you share information. Say you have a cloud drive or something like that. Typically nothing is shared, but when you go to share a file, you can share it so that people can edit it or just view it or look at it. So there's all these little settings that are there that make things work normally really, really well, but you may not be familiar with them. So there's data sharing, location sharing. There's also backup settings when if you have a Mac and you have Time Machine, or if you're using iCloud or OneDrive or Google Drive, there are settings that automatically determine how often backups are done, how often files are synced, how often email is downloaded. So there's a lot of functions that occur automatically because for the most part, these defaults actually work for most people. And you can always adjust these and make changes. Even with energy and sleep settings, how long it takes for your screen to get dimmer, how long it takes for your computer to go to sleep. Usually it's set to dim after about 2 minutes to save energy, particularly if you're on battery mode. But if your computer is plugged in and on power and you're not on battery mode, there's a different setting for how long your screen will stay on before it dims. There's power saving functions too when you're working on just battery power, for example, to make your battery life last longer, both on your smartphones and your tablets, as well as laptops that do this. And they save power. They make your battery life longer in terms of how long it's used. And they also have settings that determine how it should charge. Usually, a battery on a device now will charge up to about 80% fairly rapidly. It charges from 0 to 50% faster, then the charging slows down automatically from 50 to 80%, and it may not charge that much more than 80% depending on how it tracks your usage. And these are energy battery life settings that are set up as defaults on your computer. There's file associations. That's a default app that opens a file. We talked a little bit about web browsers. A web file is a file. And so when you click on a web link, there's a default app that opens up that web page. But when you open up say a Word document or a Pages document or a PDF document, there is a default app that's set up in your operating system or in your device's settings that will determine what app is going to open that up. PDF files open up in your browser in Adobe or on Macs in a preview. For example, JPEG images often open up in a browser or in a Photos app, but they can be opened up in other applications. If you right-click on a file like a JPEG file, if you right-click on either Windows or Macs, for example, you will give you the choice to open with another application. It'll list the applications that's capable of opening it. And MP3 audios usually open up in whatever music player is set to your default music player. Again, Microsoft and Apple and Google with Android, they've all set up a default that will open these things up for you. So you don't have to think about it if you don't want to. And they usually work pretty well. So each type of file has a default program, and you can change it in your settings when you change default applications. And I'll give you a little explanation of where to find these changes later on too. So defaults are pretty much everywhere you may want to find them. They're available for your printers. They're available for your email signature. There's your ringtone that you have that you might, not realize you can change your ringtone. You've got a default language that you set up when you set up your device. You've got a default keyboard layout if you're using a smartphone or a tablet with a touch screen. And so these defaults are just everywhere on our devices. We just don't think about them that often. So it saves time with defaults because you know where to look when something doesn't work as expected. Say, why didn't that happen? Why can't I download it? Why can't I, edit something? It reduces frustration when you understand why things open or get saved in certain ways. You have a better understanding of how the system is working. That's just the way it's set up to do it. And you can change it if you want to, but you don't have to. And it'll make it easier and give you more confidence to customize it if you ever want to do it. Well, that's the important thing is if you want to change any of these things, you can customize them if you ever want to. Now, where do you locate these settings? Well, in Windows, if you click the Start menu and select Settings, you can get that, and that works really effectively. So the Windows icon or selecting Settings On a Mac, if you click the Apple icon menu in the top left and choose System Settings, and on iPhones and iPads, if you tap the Settings app on the home screen, you can get to any of these settings. And on Androids, if you swipe down from the top and tap the gear icon and what they call the quick panel, or you can tap the Settings app. And on top of all of that, you can use the search function if on anything, anytime you want to do it, or you can ask your AI assistant to help you understand it. So if you say, gee, I want to make my default font larger when I create an email, a great way to find out how to get that done is to ask an AI like Gemini or Copilot or anything else. Just be sure to mention what type of device you're using and when you're working with it, so you can make those changes. It really gives you a way to personalize your technology when you understand how defaults work, how to set them up, by giving yourself control. Obviously, when we're first using a device, we may just want to use the defaults to get it going. We want to explore options and discovering what you can change and do. And we want to personalize it to make it more comfortable for us to use, because if we're working with it on a regular basis, things like backgrounds or sizes of text or how long it stays, the screen stays active before it goes to sleep, those are all things that make it easier for us to use our technology and make it easy for us to personalize. I just wanted to cover a little bit about what defaults are, what they are, where they do work, how they function, so you have an understanding that when you do almost anything on your computer or smartphone or tablet, or even with other types of technology, there's something set up to work in a way that works for most people without needing to make any changes whatsoever. But you can make changes if you want to. And some of you have already, one of the common things for people to do is to change the size of the text on their smartphones to make it easier to read, or to change the background image on a screen to make it something that you want to personalize, and we've actually done things with our Zoom settings. If some of you have already changed backgrounds and changed the standard background to a virtual background, that's a form of customizing it. If the standard background just comes out and says, okay, what the camera sees is what you're going to get, but you can choose a different way of doing things. And that's a really good example of what we are using right now to understand how the fact that there's a default, but we can make it customized if we want to. And so those are some tips to help you understand what defaults are, how they work, and to have a better understanding of the terminology.